Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining the 2021 Landscape Summit. My name is Esen Momo. I am head of the Florida Friendly Landscaping Program, which is a partnership with IFAS Extension and the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. We operate under the Center for Land Use Efficiency. Today's topic is Homeowner Associations and the Florida Friendly Landscaping Act. Please put your questions to the chat box. We will take those after each talk. We have very distinguished speakers today. In the first session, we have two speakers, Deirdre Irwin and Lorna Broward. Let me give you a brief bio about our speakers. Deirdre Irwin is the Water Conservation Coordinator for the St. Johns River Water Management District. With over 29 years of experience at the district, she has worked with the agency's Surface Water Regulatory Program, Water Resource Education Program, Certification Program Development, and Water Supply Planning. Her work as the Florida Water Star Coordinator and Water Conservation Coordinator involves administering the Water Star program and assisting with the training and outreach program. Deirdre works closely with the district staff in the development of regional water supply plans and coordinates a utility water conservation group that meets quarterly. Deirdre serves on the board of Florida Green Building Coalition on the statewide Florida Friendly Landscaping Advisory Committee. Deirdre serves as chair of the Water Use Efficiency Division for the Florida section of American Water Works Association. Let me introduce Lorna Broward. Lorna is currently serving as IFAS Extension Broward County Director and Urban Horticulture Agent. She is presently leading Broward County's Master Gardener Volunteer Program, the Florida Friendly Landscaping Program, and the Sustainable Urban Food Production Short Course. Lorna is very excited to combine her previous architectural and construction administration experience with horticultural expertise. She is a lead and Florida Water Star accredited professional and Florida Friendly Landscaping certified professional. Lorna feels honored to deliver sustainable and environmentally friendly programs in Broward County to help make communities greener. Lorna is currently pursuing her PhD at the University of Florida under the Environmental Horticulture Department, where she will be searching water conservation in the built environment. With those introductions, floor is yours, Deirdre and Lorna.
Thank you, Esen, for a wonderful introduction for both of us. So, thank you for joining us today as we explore in our presentation the role of certification programs in Florida landscape trends. Our certification title, "Certifications: One Piece of the Sustainable Landscape Puzzle." We will look at the various approaches, their performance, and if in fact they have a meaningful place in sustainable landscaping in Florida. So as has been discussed in previous sessions in this Urban Landscape Summit, one cannot overlook the impact of current landscaping trends in Florida's natural resources. During today's session, we will explore how these programs do in fact contribute to sustainable landscapes and explore ways we can do it better. When we are thinking of water demand, in particularly in Florida, meeting future water demands in Florida can only happen probably one or two ways. And that is by increasing our supply or by decreasing the use of it. So as Florida's population growth increases and the water demand increase, the Florida's landscape will play a vital role in our future water demands. So water demand already exceeds supply in some parts of Florida, and projections show that the state could double its current water usage by 2070. If the population growth continues, water use habits and the irrigation practices do not change. Here you will see a slide of a projection of what that might look like, comparison in 2005 versus 2016. As you can see, the density, the projected density of Florida. When we're thinking about our landscapes, right, and all these sessions have always come back to our landscapes, right? Up to the impact of landscaping, we do know based on research that up to 55% of our Florida's household total water consumption might be directed at the landscapes, right? So typical residential landscape plants often receive water that is required to perform at a satisfactory level. And this water applied in excess presents an opportunity for conservation. So we know that Florida faces clear challenges in protecting both our water quality and quantity. The Water 2070 study acknowledged that the single most effective strategy to reduce demand in Florida is for individuals to reduce residential water use for landscaping irrigation. So certifications that we're going to present to you, the programs, they seek to minimize a negative impact as it pertains to our landscapes. Deirdre is going to present current water challenges that we are facing in Central Florida.
Thank you, Lorna, and thanks for the invitation to present here today. So as Lorna said, it's generally acknowledged that with growing water supply concerns in Florida, landscape water use is considered to be an area where efficiency can benefit both water quantity and water quality. Take, for instance, this area in Central Florida known as the Central Florida Water Initiative. It's a regional water supply planning region. This slide shows that the historic and projected water use in the planning region, and it shows us that the area's population is expected to have a 49% increase to 4.4 million people by 2040, and that's indicated by the black line. Public water supply, or utility water, remains the highest water use category. It's the one in blue, and it's followed by agriculture. Outdoor water use then is targeted in this region as really the low-hanging fruit for conservation or water use reduction. Efforts to continue efficient use of water is essential if we're going to meet the goals in this region and reduce those impacts to natural systems that we're already seeing. So let's talk now a little more. We'll drill down on that irrigation water use and why all this water is being used outdoors and what is that impact on our water supply. So there are 4 common issues that contribute. In-ground automatic irrigation systems are often poorly designed and installed, especially in areas where there are no design requirements for new systems. Also, there is frequently inadequate maintenance of these irrigation systems, hence the overuse of water. Even though we have statewide irrigation restrictions, they are often not followed and not enforced. And then finally, despite having a statute that mandates rainfall shutoff devices, they frequently fail after just a couple of years. So there's new data that we have gained access to from the H2O SAVE program at UF that it was provided between 2015 and 19 by 13 utilities all the way from Northeast Florida, Central and Southwest Florida that confirms what we had suspected and seen in previous data, that 44 to 55% of household use is used outdoors to water grass. And keep in mind, that's on top of approximately 50 inches of rainfall that we receive in Florida. So with all this water, you might wonder why many landscapes look like this. Frequently, they are the result of state mandates, local codes, HOA covenants, and of course, the builder's budget. Layers of requirements that often conflict result in landscapes that are hard to maintain, they perform poorly, and they provide limited aesthetic or ecosystem value. The end product is not always very attractive and frequently contributes to overuse of water and chemicals. Voluntary certification and recognition programs do seek to address these deficiencies and create landscapes that minimize water and chemical additions, thereby protecting water resources. So separate from the voluntary certification programs, which we're going to talk about more shortly, let's look at some of the legislative solutions that are commonly discussed. First, let's look at the Florida Building Code and why it really doesn't address landscapes. So now it's in its 7th edition. The code governs the design, construction, alteration, demolition of public and private buildings and facilities. The purpose of the building code, the purpose of the building code is to provide minimum standards to safeguard life and limb. It was never essentially designed to protect water resources, to cover irrigation and landscaping. So it has very limited impact outside the home or the structure that has to abide by the code. Next, we have local codes and ordinances, which are, when well written and well implemented, can be very effective, but that's a lot of whens, and it does not always happen. Current local landscape codes have resulted in a patchwork of differing codes across Florida, which can mean that a large builder who builds in, say, 10 different local government areas might be dealing with 10 different local codes for landscape and irrigation. It's not exactly an ideal situation. So it's apparent that many of our newer community landscapes are defined by meeting these minimum codes on a reduced budget. For the homeowner, this means greater application of water and chemicals, often for the life of the landscape. Contributing also to this vision is the pace of building in Florida, which often results in poor adherence to these codes, a shortage of landscape species, and sometimes settling for an inferior product. Another reality that we hear from builders regularly is that buyers rarely ask about the performance of the irrigation system or the diversity of plants in the landscape. So why should they go above and beyond what's required in local code? One other contributing factor is that new homeowners are frequently from another state and they're not familiar with Florida landscapes or climate. And because they're not sure how to maintain the landscape, it also often results in overwatering or over-application of chemicals. Certification programs, however, propose an alternative. Landscapes seeking to meet green building criteria are typically more sustainable, more likely to be resilient in that they have larger landscape beds, less monoculture, more trees, a wider variety of landscape plants, as well as a focus on native species, better mulching practice, maybe soil amendments, possible alternative water sources for irrigation. I keep pressing that button, don't I? And a greater attention to detail, design detail and installation practices. It is important to remember though, even though they might be designed correctly, installed correctly and certified, these programs do encourage maintenance and education maintenance for the homeowner after certification. It is hard to monitor or interact with the homeowner after the project is certified. A certification program, no matter how good it is or how good the criteria are, certifies that the home and the landscape meet the criteria on that one day that it's inspected. So let me hand you back to Lorna, who's going to take us down the certification pathway.
Thank you, Deirdre. So the question is really, or are certifications a solution to this? Can green building certification programs offer a solution to our water consumption challenges in the landscape? Their irrigation criteria and green building programs can go a long way towards reining in high water use. Designing and installing the irrigation systems to operate efficiently is halfway to reducing the use, like Deirdre mentioned. Landscaping criteria in these programs can further enhance the ecosystem's features of the landscape, increase native species, reduce invasives, and attract pollinators. So let me introduce you to here's the world, or some of the main players of the world of building certifications, and this is just a few of them. Okay, these programs have been around for the last 20 years and are well established and generally known by the building community. Let's take a look back a few years at the evolution of these green building certification programs so we can examine their impact. So in the late 1990s, there was an increased interest in alternative approaches to how we build and landscape. And so the growth of what is now a large cottage industry, green building certifications began. Okay, so at that time, there was a great belief in the promise that many resources concerns will be solved by embracing this new model of labeling a home. Considerable work went into developing sound criteria and training professions to design, build, and inspect these homes and commercial properties went into place. There's considerable expertise in the state on how to design and install more sustainable landscapes. The programs we should discuss for the most part operate in isolation and even compete for customers. Many inspectors are trained in several of these programs and do offer their customers a variety of options. So let's talk a little bit about the certification programs. And for the purposes of our presentation today, I wanted to be able to separate those certifications that are known as holistic certification programs, which really means that they're covering the full entire duration of the life of that particular building. So for example, you have LEED, which is Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design, one of the programs. You have the National Association of Home Builders and the Florida Green Building Coalition. These programs are really looking at the full carbon footprint, including water. So they're taking in from the design all the way to the end of construction. And they're taking into consideration, materials, energy, everything that goes into that building. So it's the holistic certification program. And then you have the specific certification programs, and those are, for example, Energy Star, Florida Water Star, and Water Sense. What these holistic certification programs are doing is that they're encouraging, for example, when it comes to water, so the new appliances that are going in have this certification, like Energy Star appliances or Water Sense labels for their faucets and the whole water component, because they know that they're going to come in already with low water flow toilets. And so the specific certifications do complement the holistic certification programs. The other thing too is that programs are based upon acceptance-based management practices in the building and the landscaping world. So it's important though to note that programs usually must be considered affordable, okay, and achievable to the builder. Okay, these homes must still be attractive to the buyer, and you have tools that come with it. Where you want to make sure that you're including that. It's going to come in with a water use reduction. It's going to have a runoff prevention, landscape diversity, and native species inclusion. When we're actually talking about a certification and what it means, we're talking about third-party certifications. The term that we will use today, and perhaps the most important, is the certification here. And what does it mean? The standard detailed in the International Standards Organization ISO 17020 states that a third-party certification means that independent party has reviewed the project and has determined that it has met the specific criteria of that program. In this case, if there's that third-party certifier is a Florida Water Star inspector, has gone through the training to become the inspector of that particular program. And speaking of certifications, I wanted to drive your attention and how to define third-party certifications versus recognitions. So in this case, in the world of LEED buildings, okay, you see a picture here that shows a building, and then you have the professionals on the right. Typically, when we define third-party certifications versus recognitions, officially people earned a LEED accreditation, okay, and buildings become certified. And the industry, there seems to be an interchangeably reference that both building and professionals are certified, but that's incorrect. You have the credential industry, and then you have the certified buildings. So diving a little bit into the world of the first certification program, and that is the LEED certification program. LEED stands for Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design, and it was developed by the U.S. Green Building Council, and it was to set a benchmark for design, construction, maintenance, and operation of high-performance green buildings and homes. So LEED began in 1993. It was spearheaded by Natural Resource Defense Council senior scientist Robert Watson. He was also the founding chairman of the LEED Steering Committee until 2006. But he led a broad-based consensus process, which included nonprofit organizations, government agencies, architects, engineers, developers, builders, product manufacturers, and other industry leaders. And as the interest in the LEED grew, a newly formed LEED Technical Committee was created in 1996. So you go from 1994 to 2006, and the LEED program grew from one standard for new construction to a comprehensive system set of 6 standards covering all aspects of the development and construction process. So LEED also has grown from 6 volunteers originally on one committee to more than 200 volunteers and nearly 20 committees and over 200 professionals staffed in Washington state. It is the most widely used green building rating system in the world. And Florida, it is a national program. And Florida has, since the release of its first construction version in 1998, it has 4,556 LEED certified projects. And from those, a total of 1,386 of LEED homes, and representing combined more than 125 million square feet of square foot area, okay? So available for virtually all certified projects in building types. It has a landscape component, and there are 4 levels of certification depending on a point system. And here you can see you have from the left to the right, a building can go from basic certification if you hit those points between 40 and 49, and then it goes into silver, gold, and platinum if it's 80 and above. I am a LEED accredited professional, and I've been following this program for quite some time. And I can tell you, coming from the design build industry, I was part of it for 18 years. It has really transformed the design build industry. And it has been part of this certification cottage industry. So I'm going to hand it over to Deirdre. She can talk to you more about the Florida Green Building Coalition program.
Thank you, Lorna. So here in Florida then, after or while LEED was being developed, the Florida Green Building Coalition formed in the 1990s. And it is a 501c3 with a really robust membership of builders, designers, inspectors, and public agency staff. And it's widely considered to be a really good entry point for builders if they are trying green building for the first time. It's got an ease of use that's very attractive to builders. And it really focuses in on Florida, our specific climate and our specific ecosystems. And it is a green building program that's really designed well for the state of Florida. It has the highest number of certifications of all programs in the state, and it prides itself on how it's designed with the Florida climate in mind. And it's run by a really committed group of building professionals from many different backgrounds who volunteer their time as part of the FGBC committee. It's got a very broad reach in Florida with several very effective certification versions. In particular, I draw attention to the local government certification, which is very wide-ranging and broad, and it's very well respected in the state with over, I believe, 65 or more local governments have gotten this certification and renew when it expires. So it collaborates with other programs, a little unlike all the programs out there. It has a good relationship with both the Florida Water Star program and with Florida Friendly Landscaping. And staff from both these programs have a seat on the board of the FGBC. And as a disclaimer, I serve on the board of the FGBC. Part of the mission also of the FGBC is beyond certification. Their goal is to educate the general public about the importance of green building. And they also give out annual scholarships to college students who are studying in the field of green building. And then moving on to a program I know even better is the Florida Water Star program. So as many of you know, in the early 2000s, St. John's River Water Management District launched Florida Water Star, a certification program focused purely on water efficiency, both inside and outside the home. WaterStar quickly partnered with the other water management districts to make it a statewide program. And then more recently in 2017, WaterStar actually partnered with the Florida Home Builders Association, which is really a clear message that the industry is interested in building more sustainably in the state. The program also offers training to the landscape industry and an accreditation that has been given out to over 500 professionals in the landscape irrigation fields. As with other certification programs, it attracts different kinds of builders with different budgets. WaterStar works to provide criteria options for these applicants, and it certifies everything from lots actually of not-for-profit homes for workforce families and to high-end custom-built homes. The program criteria take a prescriptive approach to landscape and irrigation criteria, and it is third-party verified by testing, inspection, verification companies, otherwise known as TICs. Companies like UL and Intertech serve as the certifying entity for the program. Let's take a quick look at the performance of the WaterStar program. So I have three different sources of verification or quantification of the program. It was very important to WaterStar from the beginning to quantify the water savings. There's no point in having a program if it doesn't actually perform. So the first study or analysis done was by Southwest Florida Water Management District. They analyzed the known savings of each component or criteria of the program and compared its water use to non-WaterStar homes. And that effort revealed an annual savings range between 31 and 48,000 gallons per home relevant to their district. The next study is probably the largest study, and it was conducted by UF and Toho Water Authority, and it compared a number of WaterStar certified homes because at that time WaterStar was mandated in Toho Water Authority, and it compared them with similarly sized non-WaterStar homes, and in certain components of the study it had similar results between 43 and 47% savings. Specifically in the outdoor region of the home, and that quantified into 31 to 47 kgal or 1,000 gallons per year. The study did also reveal how certain approaches to maintaining the landscape can result in higher than expected water use. So there were many findings in this study. And then the last one we look at real quick is from over in Marion County. Bay Laurel is the utility for On Top of the World, and they also require WaterStar on all new homes over the last couple of years. And they took a closer look at what the WaterStar home is using compared to non-WaterStar within their development. And they obviously found very similar. So we were really encouraged to see that three totally independent studies showed a similar in the 30 to 45,000 gallon per year range, which is a very respectable water savings. So in many areas of the state, WaterStar is written into local code, either certification or just abiding by the criteria. And in some places it's required, or there are rebates for the program up to $1,000 per home in the Tampa Bay water region. Polk County, St. Pete, Toho, OUC, and Orlando all provide varying kinds of rebates or incentives. So let's move on to a program now known very well by many people in this audience, and Lorna, I'll let you take it away with Florida Friendly.
Thank you, Deirdre. Yes, so into the introduction of a Florida-friendly landscaping program. So the Florida-friendly...
Oh.
Sorry. I was muted. Okay, so the Florida-friendly landscaping program is really how it fits within the rest of them is really an educational outreach program informing homeowners and professionals how they can be more environmentally friendly with their landscape care practices. And this is very important because it's really now tapping into the maintenance of the landscape and how this can help protect Florida's natural environment for future generations. So the Florida Friendly Landscaping Program is not a third-party certification program, but it complements various national and local certifications, such as the LEED, which is a national, and then you have the Florida Water Star, which is more specific. For example, I've been part of a LEED certification program, home, where it got the LEED certification, and then it went into specific Florida Water Star certification. The same property went into then a Florida Friendly Landscaping recognition, and that was a wonderful a trio, because then we wanted to make sure that the early efforts that went into making it LEED and Florida Water Star were going to be maintained with the practices of the FFL program. Now, historically, the FFL program also recognition started in 1995, recognizing the home landscape as part of a larger natural system would help us make that sound decisions in increasing Florida-friendly yard. Now, the mission of the Florida-friendly landscaping program is really to educate the Floridians about the science-based, environmentally friendly landscaping practices, and to encourage them to conserve and protect our water resources by applying those principles in their landscape. So as you may or may not know, the Florida Friendly program has 3 sub-programs. Each of these sub-programs teaches the same 9 principles, but they provide the targeted education to those different audiences. So to your left, you have the Florida Yards and Neighborhoods, and that targets the homeowners, the gardeners, and the youth. Then you have the Florida Friendly Communities. That's really targeting municipalities, builders, developers, and property managers. And then the Green Best Management Industries targets the landscape maintenance professionals. For example, according to the Florida statute, anyone applying fertilizer commercially in Florida must go through the GIBMP training. Also, the Florida Friendly Landscaping Program is also written into the Florida statute 373.185. The program has 9 principles, and that the landscape must comply with existing codes, laws, ordinances, and HOA rules if applicable. It recognizes yards with 2-level recognitions, the silver and the gold. Also, it recognizes landscapes that use sustainable landscape practices, minimizes the use of potable water for irrigation, and avoid the runoff of excess fertilizers and pesticides from the landscape to provide habitats for wildlife. It's always, I always get the question, well, what do Florida Friendly landscape homes look like? Well, they can take any form, from more traditional to more natural, right? But this is the best part for me, having had all the back end of all these certifications, is that it's really how the landscape is designed and maintained that ultimately determines if it's a Florida friendly. And I think that is a wonderful thing that we have here with this program. To help homeowners predict the impact of implementing some of the water conservation measures listed on the FFL checklist, we have these wonderful conservation measures here that is actually provided by University of Florida. It's a table that is estimated the water savings that have been developed. For example, you can calculate, if you reduce the turf on X amount of square footage, how much potential water savings by gallons you can save. So it is a wonderful tool and document to share during presentations and to even builders and the communities, so that they can see the potential impact that these principles can have in the landscape in terms of actual savings. The program historically has recognized since 1995, 1,079 homes. And just in the period between 2014 and 2020, around 150 recognitions have taken place. Obviously, those probably been impacted by COVID. So, we come back to this issue of, our title and saying, the certifications are one piece of the landscape puzzle. Florida has a variety of codes that could do more really to change the use of water in the landscape. Water conservation strategies and green building certifications for the industry, like we've presented, can allow a wonderful opportunity to pilot test alternative landscapes, create acceptance of different approaches, training the green industry to try new methods, and offering opportunities to measure the impact of alternative landscaping. But here's the thing. They are one piece of the sustainable landscape puzzle because they're not targeting the behavior of the end user, which is the homeowner. So I'm going to hand it over to Deirdre so she can share how green building certification impacts.
And this slide is our kind of surprise slide based on our research. So we've established that Florida has a wealth of options to certify a home. But how big is this piece? How many homes are actually being built to this standard? Certification programs they're well established, as Lorna said. We've been building green for over 20 years, so it's not a young industry at this point, where it's an adult industry, if you like, and they're not really having the impact we would have wanted by now. And the criteria have been vetted, the homes we know perform, the professionals are trained. So you might wonder, why is only 6% of homes built, for instance, last year? Why are they built to a green standard? Or why are they not built to a green standard? Here's what we hear from builders, because we're out there selling this program, and this is what my colleagues in other programs share also. Cost, they say it costs too much, but I have to share that when we offer rebates for that exact amount, they still don't participate. So it's not really cost. Buyers are not asking for certified homes, and that's true. Very few people ask for an Energy Star, a LEED home. There are only a very few unique customers looking for certified homes. Time and complexity to train subcontractors, hire inspectors, etc. That's very real consideration for builders. This will slow down building. And with the current boom in the housing market, they really don't have an incentive or a need to build differently or more sustainably. So there's clearly a number of barriers preventing the growth of the green industry that does need to be addressed. So before we get to solutions, let me quickly review the role of certification programs in sustainable landscaping. Many options are out there for builders to get based on the interest, branding, affordability, or their type of customer. All the programs have varying versions of commonly accepted BMPs that are known to be effective in sustainable landscaping. And Florida has several options for training of the professionals to make sure these get certified correctly. Generally, however, these programs are voluntary, and they represent only a very small percentage of homes built sustainably in Florida. We do know from our research that the cost to build a green home is rarely over 1% of the value of the home. So it is not a significant increase in cost. WaterStar has succeeded in becoming part of code, has offered rebates, and is partnering with FHBA. Still, it has a very low penetration rate in the marketplace. One shining example, however, is when a developer agrees to just build green for his entire development. For instance, Lakewood Ranch, Babcock Ranch, or when a utility requires a green built home for their certificate of occupancy or a condition of service. These situations are quite rare, however. So I'm going to hand you back to Lorna to examine just a few options before we wrap up on how we think perhaps we could encourage or improve this green building effort in Florida.
Thank you, Deirdre. So we take you all the way to the various programs that are out there, and usually they go through sometimes 18 months until they actually receive this. Okay, and they've been either Florida Green Building Coalition certified, they are become LEED certified, and then that particular builder, developer, or homeowner gets this plaque, which they've been wanting to have and share, and then that's it. There is nothing else done here, meaning that after the certification, there is no follow-up, there is nothing to make sure that the care and attention that took place it continues, okay? So obviously, when we're thinking of exploring solutions, these are just ideas that collectively we came together based on our experience and what we've seen from working together on certifications. Is really, we have carefully selected the puzzle analogy in our title, and that's because usually it takes many pieces in a puzzle, and there are many pieces needed to achieve a successful, sustainable landscaping. It takes a village, Many of these pieces do exist now, but they're still in the box waiting to be assembled. And there must be a desire amongst everyone to complete that puzzle. And I can tell you those three things that we have here is we feel that there needs to be more synergies and more connections at a policy level, enforcing policies, providing incentives. Many times, you take it as far as, a certification, but there's nothing else for that particular homeowner to want to go after. And, you can put all the, skip a week water regulations, but there's no enforcement. No one's really piloting this. So that's an issue, right? So also the design build industry, I think that there's an enormous opportunity here for educating targeting those builders, the irrigation landscape contractors, the landscape industry. I think that is another component where we need to really come together. And then lastly, come on, we're IFAS here, extension, and we are educators, we are agents of change, and being able to bring IFAS together to work with those homeowners, I think it's really vital. Solution number 2 is really honing in into the IFAS research relationship, strengthening with development and builders, community and existing green building programs. I think that there's a disconnect between research, science, public, and the design build industry. And we know that the general population are mostly influenced by social norms, their peer groups rather than government and science. So by IFAS connecting with the existing certification programs, perhaps, we can deliver a sustainable story to the people, the users, the ones that are gonna really make it happen. I'm going to hand it over to Deirdre so she can share an example of a case study between FFL and Florida Water Star.
Okay, and I'll be real brief because I see that we're going over in time, but over the past year, WaterStar has partnered with FFL to develop a new version of WaterStar Gold, where we merge criteria and we provide not only the certification criteria up front, but also that second piece, working with every homeowner who will participate through the Florida Friendly program. And we're hoping this approach will be a little more effective. And Lorna, back to you.
All right. So, and lastly, it's extension. We have this amazing, powerful program, which is the Florida Friendly Landscaping Program. And what I personally love about the program, it's really, it is a, it's a behavior-driven program. It's connecting between research, science, and the public, So, for example, we are agents of change, and FFL and the extension family can play an essential piece on that puzzle just by strengthening and working together. So I think that's pretty much it, right? So we want to thank you on behalf of Deirdre and myself. We want to thank you for joining us today. And I hope that you found the presentation helpful. Our goal was really to present the Green Building Certification's role in sustainable landscape in Florida, and hopefully inspire us to find new ways to collaborate, conserve, and protect our precious water resource by working together, which is really the ultimate goal. Thank you.
Thank you very much, both of you. Such a great presentation. We have a question, actually a combined question in the chat box. Let me read it through. How could we start requiring these programs on a broad scale? Just to clarify, how can we require green development?
I don't mind jumping in and starting there, Lorna, and I'll let you add to it. This is the question. How do you take all these great programs with great criteria and make them happen? Voluntary up to date doesn't work. a tiny majority for very legitimate reasons. The Florida Building Code, many people say that's their answer, that's our answer. It should be in Florida Building Code. That's really not the purpose of the building code, to address landscapes. So really, that's why we see this mishmash of local governments, counties requiring certain certifications and the like. The only other option would be a statute that mandates all homes be built to this standard. So, you know, my recommendation is that there needs to be a statewide discussion on where we are today. We know it's possible, but it's not happening. And we need to find a solution that works best for both the builders, because if it doesn't, they won't do it, the homeowners, and all of these programs.
Yeah, I
Lorna?
agree. I agree, and I don't think it's a question of adding more programs. I mean, they keep adding more programs. It's just really stop analyzing like we've done in this presentation and really see how we can put the pieces together, because there's a lot of elements out there that we need to tie in to make this happen.
Okay, just one more question on the chat box. Would it help to get more and more local governments to adopt codes so it gets to the point that it forces the state to adapt rules that are statewide so that there is one standard?
Go for it, Deirdre.
I have so many opinions. So, you know, that's happening. For many years now, local governments have been amending their local codes and ordinances to require certain irrigation design, tree planting, square footage of high volume irrigation, if that's what you want to call it. And we see great enthusiasm when a code is first assembled, passed by the county commission, and then over the years, as staff changes and that initial interest seems to change, and a lot of these codes are not well enforced over time. Yeah. And to the point where people forget, why did we have this again? Or they're poorly written and misunderstood. So one thing we do at the district is, as a service, we partner up with all our local governments to try and make these codes very similar, easy to read, and make sure it's achievable. Don't make it so complex that you can't afford to implement that code. Make it achievable.
Yeah, and I would say add to that is that it really comes down to the users also, because what good is it if you get this green package and you don't know how to maintain it? You know, so it defeats the whole purpose, which is what I've been seeing, you know, for the last 18 years on all these programs. And that is where I think extension has a role. You know, we have an opportunity there to really educate the user.
And there's one comment on the chat box: partnership will help. Certainly.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yep.
All right, I would like to thank you all again. And if you don't mind, I would like to introduce Barbara Stage as our third speaker for the summit. Barbara Billett Stage is an Orlando-based attorney with the Stage Law Firm. The Stage Law Firm, which consists of Barbara and 3 of the best paralegals in the business. They practice community association law only. Their motto is, if you are passionate about something, then give it to your 200%. Barbara can explain this to us. Barbara is a very passionate gardener who practices FFL herself. She is also on our statewide Florida Friendly Landscaping Advisory Committee. We truly appreciate her assistance and guidance on the FFL legislature. Barbara, floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. As Ethan said, I practice all over the state of Florida, representing homeowners and associations alike. And what I've seen over the years is, you know, Florida Friendly Landscaping has come a long ways as far as the issues we were having with allowing homeowners to have it versus HOAs who in the past had tended to take the stance it's my way or the highway. The cover of my presentation, this is actually a home in the Bay Hill subdivision of Orlando. It's where the Arnold Palmer Golf Course is.
Barbara, I think
Yeah.
we need you to share your screen.
Oh, okay. I thought I had. Let's see. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Before you get too far.
Share screen again. Are you able to see it?
No.
Let's see. Let me try. Is it showing up yet?
It is not.
I am saying share screen. Let's see. How about now?
Yes, now we can see it.
Okay. All right, now let me just set this up for the slideshow. Okay. So
Right. Yes.
again, this is a home in Bay Hill. This was a case, one of the first cases I handled after the law was revised in 2009. Prior to 2009, homeowners associations could not prohibit Florida-friendly landscaping unless there were restrictions in their declarations that required specific grasses to be used or certain amounts of the yard to have sod. So in 2009, the governor at the time, Charlie Crist, as one of his last acts in office, revised the law to say that Florida-friendly landscaping could not be prohibited no matter what was in the declarations, which was fantastic. So this was a homeowner who had purchased a second home. They were a prominent family up north, and they purchased a second home in the Bay Hill community, and they implemented Florida-friendly landscaping. And the association sent them violation notices. They replied with they had a legal right to Florida-friendly landscaping, and it ended up in a big lawsuit. And the sad thing about lawsuits is it comes down to money. Can the homeowner afford it? Not just financially, but emotionally. In this case, the litigation, because the association was very aggressive and wanting to take depositions constantly, it was interfering with the homeowner's practice. He was a prominent doctor, so to cancel appointments, to fly to Orlando, to sit for a 30-minute deposition, it was getting ridiculous. So they settled the case. They agreed to remove a couple of plants, despite the fact that they had neighbors who had these plants. And if you look along the pavers, there's these chevaliers. And the homeowners agreed they would not let them grow any taller than 12 inches. So the case settled. It settled on 2 days before Christmas. And then the homeowners went back up north for the Christmas holidays. And the association immediately sent someone out with a ruler to measure the plants. And then sent them a breach of contract lawsuit because there were a few leaves that were a ½ inch taller than the 12 inches. So that's how petty these things could get. Needless to say, the homeowner is now the president of the association. So that resolved that problem. As I said, the Florida-friendly landscaping statute had been enacted. It was in Chapter 373, and then in 2009, it actually became part of Chapter 720, the Homeowners Association Act. So the issue was, initially with these, was the language wasn't very specific, and it hasn't changed since 2009. But it did give homeowners the impression that they had an absolute right and that they didn't need to fill out any kind of applications to submit to the HOA. And that part was a common misconception, because there still has to be an application to the HOA if they require one. But the HOA cannot do anything that would prevent implementing the Florida-friendly landscaping. They can, make suggestions on, swapping out some plants in the plan for, something else. So what a lot of associations have done over the years is they have implemented a Florida-friendly landscaping policy, and some of the more effective associations have created a plant list so that the homeowners can choose from the plant list, but yet the plans, if a number of homeowners implement them, they complement each other. And then they do have a process where if that plant is not suitable for that location because of the environmental conditions, they can create a waiver or variance for that homeowner. So the associations have come a long ways. They have started working more with the homeowners when it comes to the homeowner requesting Florida-friendly landscaping. The problem is, board members come and go, and it takes some education for the board to learn what's acceptable, what is not acceptable. So our firm, as part of our training for our board members, is when they hire our firm, we give them free one-on-one training, so that we go over not just the statutes in Chapter 720, but we also go over their documents. And one of the things that I always highlight is the Florida-friendly landscaping. So this is just basically the statute as it was passed. And the key point of this is it starts out with the legislature font. And that key word is that this statute was passed as a matter of public policy, so it can be applied retroactively, because the Florida Constitution prohibits the retroactive application of laws to change contracts and declarations, deed restrictions. Those are contracts between the HOA and the homeowners. So this was a key part, that this was a public policy statute and it could apply retroactively. One of the things I always caution homeowner associations to do, and I caution homeowners about this too, is don't try to get creative with the statute. One of the cases that I followed, and I was asked to follow the case and give a second opinion periodically to the attorney on the case, was Sable Ridge Homeowners Association versus Bruno in Pasco County. And the Brunos, they had tried for years to sustain the St. Augustine grass, but they had a very large lot, big oak trees. Shade isn't always friendly to grasses. So they wanted to implement some mulch and a Florida-friendly landscaping plan. And of course, the association sued them, saying that, they had to have 80% of the yard had to be sod. So the judge in this case was great. He said that the statute was unambiguous and the homeowners had a right to their Florida-friendly landscaping, and that the deed restrictions could not prohibit them from having Florida-friendly landscaping. So he ruled in their favor. They won the case. The association didn't stop there. They sued him again afterwards, trying to reword it, the complaint, and be a little bit more crafty. And it was thrown out again eventually. But as of the last time I checked, October 5th, 2020, there was not a single published case involving Florida-friendly landscaping. And a published case is when a trial court rules and then someone appeals and it goes to the appellate court. The appellate court publishes decisions that are written up in the law book registries. So they become judge-made law. So applications are still required. They do not invalidate the HOA's architectural control committees or landscaping committees. And yeah, as it said, their limitations have to be reasonable. So having a suggested plant list is reasonable, but it's not the final say. The local regulation of vegetable gardens. This applies only to government and municipalities. It doesn't apply to HOAs. And despite, HOAs being very political when it comes to their disputes, they are not political subdivisions, they're not quasi-governments. So this statute does not apply, that allows homeowners to have vegetable gardens in their front yards. One of the things I did do in my own landscaping was, because I had Florida-friendly landscape, I did hide an occasional, eggplant, different tomatoes, mixed it in, and my association did not push the issue. It was an attractive garden. I just moved and I missed that garden, so I have to start over. But the plants weren't obvious, so it was not a big deal for the HOA. But as I said, HOAs, the deed restrictions are contracts, so they're binding on the owners, but there are some rights and protections for the owners. So this is another case I was involved in. This is not Florida friendly at all. The homeowner hired me. He had got this big home in foreclosure, and he didn't want to have to maintain the St. Augustine, so he just started haphazardly planting shrubs and bushes in places, and then just didn't trim them, didn't take care of them. And he was sued, and he told me, this is my Florida-friendly landscaping. And I had to break the news to him. That's not Florida-friendly landscaping. You can't even really see the front door. So this is what had caused a lot of animosity among associations and the homeowners, because, when a homeowner had a beef to pick with their HOA, they would say, well, I'm going to plant Florida-friendly landscaping. I'm going to make it an eyesore. And that's just not Florida-friendly landscaping. I had one case I was involved in. Former board president was not reelected, so he did something similar to this and claimed it was Florida-friendly landscaping. And the association was afraid to address him about the issue. So the solution to, working with the homeowners and the HOAs is to adopt the Florida-friendly landscaping model covenants, conditions, and restrictions. But an amendment to the declaration is not really necessary, because it can be impossible to amend some declarations where they require, 2/3 or up to 90% of the homeowners to approve any amendment. So even the most well-meaning HOA could run into a problem trying to amend restrictions. But HOAs have the ability to adopt rules and regulations approved by the board of directors. And so almost all HOA deed restrictions, declarations, reference landscaping and changes to landscaping. So the fact that it's mentioned in the restrictions then allows an association to adopt rules and regulations that govern the landscaping. So with just a little tweaking to the model covenants, conditions, and restrictions, they can be converted into rules and regulations that only need board approval. So just to briefly touch base on how things have changed over the years, there hasn't really been a lot of cases. I haven't received all those phone calls like I did initially, where homeowners were trying to implement Florida-friendly landscaping and they were being denied. It seems, with the passage of time, more homeowner associations are getting on board with the concept of Florida-friendly landscaping. Now it's kind of turned the other way. I see more issues with homeowners who believe that Florida-friendly landscaping means they can put pavers in their entire backyard or put rocks in their entire front yard. And so now we're seeing it the opposite, where the homeowners associations are needing help to enforce, that, okay, yeah, we can't necessarily tell you have to have 80% sod in your backyard, but you can't have 100% pavers because of the runoff and all of this either runs off onto adjacent properties to flood those properties, or it runs off into the HOA's drainage system. But it's just not an environmentally friendly idea. And then, of course, the effective use of mulch is one of the principles behind Florida-friendly landscaping. So, putting, making your whole front yard white rocks is not Florida-friendly. So now it's back to let's educate the homeowners some more. The judges in the judicial system have come a long way in understanding Florida-friendly landscaping. So this has been, something to learn as the time goes by, how the problems have kind of shifted, and it's just important that everybody be aware and dynamic on how they approach this subject. So with that, if there's any questions.
Thank you very much, Barbara. Such an informative presentation. We have a comment from Stacy Greco from Alachua County Environmental Protection. Alachua County adopted the state statute into local code in 2019. It was in October, actually, 2019, and it has gone very well. And Stacy also indicated that education from the extension agents and FFL program has been very helpful with our code. We're waiting for more questions.
Alachua County's code was one of the first ones that I studied because I did have a case in Alachua County, and the association there had adopted Florida-friendly landscaping policy, and they had a list of approved plants. The problem was with this one particular homeowner, those plants didn't work on his property because he had a large lot with a big canopy of oak trees, which are very protected. So they were heritage oaks, I believe they classify them as. So you can't just go cut down the oak trees so that the plants will grow there. But we did the pre-suit mediation and it was amazing. I was in the room 5 minutes. The board said, you know, we're going to work with this homeowner and we're going to come to an agreement. And it was very little modifications, like maybe a 3 foot by 1 foot wide section along the curb needed to be changed a little bit. So that was great.
We have one question. Has any other local government adapted the state language into code?
Quite a few local governments have. In fact, Orange County was very proactive. Once the statute was enacted, Orange County went out and replaced large sections of their property, which had St. Augustine grass. They replaced it with Bahia grass, and they encouraged the homeowners to do the same. Orange County was very proactive. Last time I checked, there were over 50 local ordinances that I did just on a simple Google search, and I didn't deep dive into all of the links. So the local governments are adopting the language, and they are very good proponents of it. On the state level, as far as trying to get legislation passed, if anybody has ever watched a legislative session, you know, in Tallahassee, and you can watch these online, you know, I have attended those, and, you know, there are deep pockets in certain industries. And so, you know, organizations that are trying to get legislation passed, they can have some great legislation, but they might be opposed by those big industries or big corporations with the deep pockets that are going to be able to block their legislation. So it, you know, getting it done on a local level is a really good plan. Trying to get it done statewide, we just, you know, need one of our legislators to address it, and trying to address the HOA industry itself can be very difficult because of those lobbyists and how long they've been there and how long you know, they've been involved in the process. Like right now, there's a push to get a statewide law against theft and fraud in HOAs. So that seems to be, you know, one of the big priority things. And I don't know if that will pass because of the opposition to it from the other side.
Any other questions for Barbara or Lorna or Deirdre? I have one, Barbara, about vegetable garden. So can I go ahead in my yard and plant a vegetable garden in my front yard without getting HOA approval?
Probably not, but it depends on your declarations. Because there was a law passed around 2015 that said if something isn't prohibited in your declarations, then it's allowed. That's another law that hasn't been tested in any appellant decisions that have been published. So it's kind of, you have to look at each individual declaration for each community and the facts of that situation, and, you know, how strict your HOA is with sticking to the declarations, because they're all different. I mean, when HOA started, they were basically land use restrictions, no cattle, things like, you know, no leaving jet skis in the front yard, and it's evolved. And now, as you know, just like anything else, as time has evolved, I mean, I have seen some associations, their declarations are like 108 pages long, and they have everything in there, like, when you park on your grass, we can tow your vehicle with no notice. So it just depends on the individual association. But most HOAs would not approve a vegetable garden, and then it becomes a matter of how much money are you willing to spend to fight them on your vegetable garden. That has happened a lot with Florida Friendly Landscaping cases in the beginning. You know, somebody starts out very passionate about it, and then they're like, okay, I'm spending thousands and thousands of dollars fighting over my grass. And, you know, it's a roller coaster. Litigation's not fun. No one has ever come back to me and said, oh, this was great. Can we do it again? Like, once is enough for most people. And if you've never had to do it, good for you.
Thank you, Barbara, for clarifying. Any other questions? There is none in the chat box, Emily.
Nope. So if there are no further questions for today, you guys can wrap up.
Well, okay, there is one. There is one. Has there been direction on this regarding the expansion of the villages area in Sumter County in reference to FFL? When you keep this close to heart, that is when change comes easier, I believe. Hope this will expand. Great work to all. Well, I don't see any other comments or questions in the chat box. And I would like to mention that next Wednesday, we are going to have a panel presentation on looking back to the present and toward the future. I would like to thank you all, especially our speakers, Barbara, Deirdre, Lorna, for presenting and giving great presentations. And thank you all for attending. Look forward to seeing you next Wednesday for the last summit presentation. And I would like you to have a great day and have a wonderful weekend. Thank you.